Good morning, everyone. I would be grateful if everyone can open their camera so we can recognize your presence. Mr. Bailiff, can you please open the court?
Mr. Frampton, I am unable to open my camera.
Pardon?
Mr. Frampton?
Justice Adrian?
I'm unable to open my camera. It says the host prevents. Okay.
My lady, I'm unable to open mine as well. Good morning.
Okay, good morning. Very well, noted. There you are.
Thank you very much, my lady.
Okay, Mr. Bailiff, can you open the court, please?
This honorable court will now resume in its special sitting.
Okay, I'm not hearing you.
This honorable court will now resume in its special sitting. I command of this court, God save the Commonwealth of Dominica and this honorable court.
Good morning, everyone. We are gathered here today to celebrate the life of Dr. William Emmanuel Para-Riviere, who is now of blessed memory. This morning, our protocol is established as follows. The Honorable, my Ladyship, Justice Wynand Adrian Roberts, Honorable Attorney General, Mr. Levi Peter, the President of the Dominica Bar Association, Mrs. Heather Felix Evans, the Director of Public Prosecutions Acting, Ms. Sherma Dalrymple, Solicitor General, Mr. Mika Hyacinth Burton, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of National Security and Home Affairs, Ms. Joanne Commodore, Chief Magistrate, Her Honor, Mrs. Candia Carrot George, and other magistrates, Registrar of the High Court, Acting Ms. Marie-Therese Etienne, Deputy Registrar of the High Court, Ms. Nuraya Sebastian. I am not sure if the Acting Registrar of the Registry of Land is present. If she is, I acknowledge her presence, Ms. Vincia Auguste. Former Attorneys General, Attorneys at Law, and the family of Dr. William E. Riviere, and members of the media. That being said, I now invite my sister, Honorable Justice, Madam Justice Wynand Adrian Roberts, to address the sitting. Justice Roberts.
Justice Stevenson, attorneys present, family, and friends of the deceased Dr. William Para-Riviere. This morning, again, we are called to recognize and to celebrate the life of an attorney at law who practiced in this jurisdiction. I cannot say that I'm very well acquainted with Mr. Rivera, but I know that on the few occasions that I had the opportunity to interact with him, I can say that he was a gentleman. He was soft-spoken, and he exhibited every form of respect that one would wish to be exercised between counsel, and that was my interaction with him as an attorney when I was an attorney practicing in this jurisdiction. Mr. Rivera did not practice very much in my time as an attorney. He did not practice very much at court. So that interaction was very small. However, the few conversations that I had with him, I can tell from these conversations that he was a man of discipline and very professional in his attitude towards his work. As a judge, I think Mr. Rivera only appeared before me on one occasion, and that was for an adjournment. And that made me think that he was one man of respect and discipline. Many occasions, attorneys seek adjournments, but would not even appear. But although he was not feeling well on that day, Mr. Rivera came to court and explained himself why it is that he sought an adjournment. This spoke volume about the person that he was. This spoke volumes of his commitment to his job, commitment to his client. So today, I remember him as a man of discipline, a man of respect, and a gentleman. I wish to condole with his family and his friends on his passing. Your memories of him, I am sure, will be good memories. And I trust that these memories will bring a spirit of joy to your hearts during this time of grief. That your memories of him will give you strength, that he would want you to move on with your lives in the as quietly as he lived his. So my sympathies to you, and may his soul rest in peace.
Thank you very much, Justice Roberts. I will now invite the Honorable Attorney General to give his remarks.
Thank you, Your Ladyship. Dr. William E. Parra Rivera, more commonly known as Parra, to all and sundry, I would imagine. First embarked on a career in academia, as most would know. And initially, I knew him as a historian in earlier days, which I shall refer to shortly. And he subsequently earned his law degree and was called to the bar and established practice in Dominica with offices in Portsmouth, his hometown, and Roseau. Parra was not a practitioner of the flamboyant ilk, and indeed he was not a person of that ilk. As has just been said by Her Ladyship, my knowledge of Parra was always of someone who was quite softly spoken and someone who, was always cordial in his engagements, certainly those that I had with him. He also contributed significantly in the area of law, but no doubt utilizing his scholastic abilities. And that is evidenced by the articles, the scholarly articles that he contributed to a local newspaper over several years, articles on various aspects of the law. I first became sort of fairly familiar with Parra and interacted with him in my youth, back in back in time, shall we say. And quite interestingly, my predominant memory of Para is not per se associated with law or the practice of law, but more with his social engagement in the community back in that time of my youth, when certainly those of my age and familiarity with Portsmouth will recall the time when a number of academics and others were returning to Dominica from tertiary education abroad, and were returning with new ideas, new concepts, new thoughts, a certain level of political and social awakening. It was during that period that I first became familiar with Para. And in particular, there is an area of Portsmouth which is known as Cacowell. And it is a project that Para and others initiated in that locality that first brought me into close contact with him. It is the area when you leave
Okay, the AG seems to have stuck. He's going to probably drop off and come back on. So what I propose to do in the meanwhile would be to move on to the next speaker, and when the learned AG comes back on, we will invite him to continue his presentation. I will now call on the former Attorney General, Mr. Henry Dyer. Is Mr. Dyer there? Mr. Dyer? Mr. Dyer? Okay, apparently Mr. Dyer is unable to hear me, so we will move on to our next listed speaker would be former Attorney General, Mr. Bernard Wiltshire. Mr. Bernard Wiltshire.
Yes, good morning, milady.
Good morning, sir. Are you able to open your camera, sir?
I'm not, well, it seems to have been blocked or stopped by, it says the host has.
Okay, the bandwidth is probably giving us. Okay, there you are.
Yes, I'm here. Yes, good morning once again, milady. I think the protocol has already been established. Let me recognize your ladyship's presence and also the Honorable Attorney General, the DPP, and all other colleagues of the profession. Milady, what can I say about Dr. Rivera? There's so much to be said about him. I've known him, I knew him for a very long time. I knew him in England. I knew him in the United States. We worked together as young Dominicans wanting to see our country progress and advance. We formed, I was a doctoral student at the at Columbia University in New York. Dr. Rivera, whom we all knew as Bill or Para, was a professor at the City University of New York. We lived very close to each other in Manhattan. I was fortunate to have been given a Columbia apartment right next to the university in the middle of Manhattan. And Brother Ron Green, who coordinated an organization called the Dominicans in Support of Progress, lived about 2 streets away from me. And Dr. Revere shared an apartment with Ron Green. So we were all very close. But what brought us really close together was the fact that we were all working on a common endeavor. And the common endeavor was to see our country move forward. Dr. Revere was a historian, and historian of no mean order. His thesis, he did his PhD at the University of Glasgow, and he wrote about the period after slavery was abolished and how the ex-slaves went about to develop an economy or to introduce themselves into the economy of the region after the ravages of slavery. And what Dr. Revere did was to trace just in minute detail just how that happened. And it's really, normally theses are very dry, things, but his thesis was, when you read it, it was moving in its own way, because there you were able to see how you or one or I or we developed, how our people took what they were left with in slavery, after slavery, and built a society that, in fact, today is an independent member of the United Nations. Dr. Revere was an extraordinary man. He was an extremely brilliant, very bright man, essentially an academic, a teacher. There's no doubt about it. But he had a revolutionary mind, a spirit to make change. And it was all informed by compassion and humility. He disliked making a big fuss about his achievements. Not for him, you couldn't accuse him of PhD-titis. He was not one of those people for whom education, who boasted about his education, not Dr. Revere. He came back after his studies to Dominica, in fact, after we left New York, and he came back to his town in Portsmouth, and that too is a very moving story. I'll never forget going up to Portsmouth one day with Athi Mate, and there was Farah in that little wooden house, little, very small, the Tikai Bois, little wooden house. Here's a man with a PhD, a noted scholar, an intellectual of great ability. But to him, the important thing was to come back as a barefoot teacher, and to work among the youth, the people who didn't have these opportunities, and to animate his community. He was a community man. And it really is extraordinary what they did. In Lagon, there was a stream, in fact, a river. I think there was some kind of wooden bridge on that river. I remember going up there and seeing it. When the river flooded, people could not cross. It was an important thing for the community a facility for the community to improve. Dr. Rivera got his youth, he mobilized and organized the youth, and they built the bridge. Government would not do it. But the youth of Portsmouth, the people did it. He had incredible faith in the people. And today we call that bridge Para Bridge. And I think it would be a travesty if in fact anybody tried to name that bridge, call that bridge any other name, but Para Bridge. He believed that the road forward for Dominica and the Caribbean, one had to understand politics. I don't know if one can say that Para was a natural politician in the way that you would say that he was a natural scholar. He was probably too earnest, too honest, too humble, too self-effacing, too caring of others, perhaps to be the kind of politicians that, that we've all unfortunately got so used to. But there was no doubt about his capacity to mobilize and to inspire and to move and to get people to think of a higher realm, to look further than the problems that we have at the moment. He was an extremely kind man. And I must say I've had my own personal example of his kindness. Some years ago, I was the subject of a great injustice. There was an attempt to frame me and to accuse me of something that I clearly had not done. One day, Para came into my office and he told me, how was I going to deal with that? And I said, well, I didn't really quite know. And he offered his services there and then. And he took on the case and worked at it. And I must say, even when I was dispirited, he continued to give me encouragement. And he worked on that case. We didn't win, but sometimes it isn't the destination that matters, it is the journey. And I will be forever grateful to him and thankful, not just for the fact that he helped me, but for the fact that he helped restore my faith in human kindness, in selflessness, and made me feel, well, perhaps my poor attempts at those virtues were probably not in vain. My lady, I cannot say that our country has given Dr. Rivera his just deserts. A prophet has no honor in his country. So the scriptures tell us. And even our Lord himself, as we know, when he went back into his own village, what did people say? Who is this man? Wasn't this man the son of a carpenter, and now he wants to come and talk all these great things to us? Para never won a seat. This is a man who should have been in government. But the perversity of politics can so work out that not the people who are best able to make the greatest contribution are normally given the opportunity, or always given the opportunity to serve. He never had the opportunity to serve the country in parliament and to legislate. But there is no doubt that he would have made a great job of it, as in fact, Honorable Judge Wynand has said that he was altogether a man of great inspiration. So, my lady, with these remarks, I just want to say to his family, to his wife, Ginny, to his children, Chico, Andrew, Alicia, I just want to say, to express my condolences and to say that Para lived a life well lived, meaningful, and he made a great contribution to Dominica. And I believe when the history is written of the 21st century, Para will be regarded as one of the great Dominicans of that era. Thank you, Malik.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wiltshire. Indeed, I'm sure you were able to share what many of us would have not been able to share today. Mr. Peter, Honorable Attorney General, I will revert to you for you to complete your presentation. And I would like at this stage to remind everyone that we're asking everyone to basically restrict themselves to 3 minutes, as we are under a time. We're on the strict time schedule, as court is due to start at 12 o'clock. Thank you. Mr. Peter.
Thank you, my lady. My lady, my apologies to yourself and to all the colleagues gathered on this medium. Technology is one of those things that sometimes makes its own way. I shall be keeping to your ladyship's timeline, I trust, because I have only a few more words to say. Lady, as I was saying, when we got disconnected, my strongest memory of Para is associated with, in fact, the project that the speaker before me, Mr. Wiltshire, referred to, which is what's now known as the Para Bridge. But at the time, there was no crossing at that point of the river. I think it's the North River formerly, but it's the area of Portsmouth known as Cackawell. And that particular area at the time, there was very little, there was no ability to cross at that point except when the river was very low. So as was indicated, Dr. Rivera Para, through mobilization of largely youth, but wider community, embarks on a project in that area, which is a voluntary project, what we commonly refer to Kudme, self-help, where people came out, certainly on the weekends from my perspective, but others tried to when they could in between, and constructed over time through self-help. There was no government involvement in that project. What became the first crossing, a walkway or bridge, but it was a pedestrian walkway or crossing of that bridge at that point, which served to connect the south bank and north bank of that river, connecting Portsmouth to Lago. And it is that project is actually the forerunner to the current bridge, which is situated there, which everybody who travels the road past the Portsmouth Market into Lago, across the river into Lago, heading towards Purple Turtle, will cross that bridge, which is the current structure is a bridge that was built subsequently by the government of the time, but really building on the pedestrian walkway that was initially constructed there. It is obvious that that particular crossing was necessary and essential, and that its impact on Portsmouth and environs was significant then and continues to be significant. Indeed, at the time, the only way, well, only the most, I suppose, the most dexterous and hardy would seek to cross at that point, because it was just a question of hopping from stone to stone. And those who have had that experience will know how precarious it is trying to cross on stones in a river. So it was mostly the province of those who were perhaps inebriated and chose to use that path, who frequently would find themselves immersed in the less than clean waters that existed at that point at the time. So that project is a project, and that connection is something that I recall of Para very strongly, and certainly it exemplified his contribution and engagement in the development thrust for Dominica, and goes alongside other spheres of activity that he has been involved in over a number of years. Perhaps the closest connection I may have outside of that is the fact that he, I believe, has roots from Cottage. Indeed, that's the area where I understand and know him to have been residing more latterly. And that's a strong connection there because my mother is also from that community, and quite close to actually his particular place of habitation at Toto. So having said all of that, I did not have a very close association and knowledge of Para. We did engage whilst at the bar on a few occasions, both formally in matters that we were dealing with, and also more personally on a social level. But as I said earlier on, I have always known Para to be, in the engagements that I've had with him, to be very cordial in those and respectful in those engagements. And it seems from what I've heard so far that that is the experience that most others have had of him as well. So I take this opportunity to conclude by expressing my condolences to the wife and broader family of Dr. Revere Para, and to express the words of comfort that others have expressed, and no doubt will perhaps more eloquently than me express in the remaining contributions here. May he rest in peace. I thank you, my lady.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mr. Levi A. Peter, the Attorney General. Now call upon Mr. Henry Dyer. Mr. Dyer, 3 minutes, please.
Your Ladyship, I've actually excused myself from cabinet to engage. So at some point I will depart. May I do so without reverting to you?
Yes, very well, sir. Very well, sir. Mr. Dyer.
Thank you. Thank you, my lady. First of all, let me apologize for having been called and I was not present. That was beyond my control. I want to adopt the protocol as it has been established. And I think it is a privilege for me to have the honor to speak about Dr. Para Revere, a close friend of mine. And with the leave of the court, my lady, I would then forth refer to him as Para. Para and myself lived opposite each other, yards away on Gridwood Street, when we attended the Dominica Grammar School, which was about 10 yards away from where we lived, in Roseau. And I remember in 1958, the inter-schools, Woodward Island inter-schools tournament held in Dominica at the Windsor Park Stadium. Dominica against Grenada, and I was involved with a record fourth wicket partnership of 245 runs, I think. And James Bell from Giodel, he was my partner who scored 127. And when he got out in the partnership, the next man coming in was Para Revere. I was in my 90s, and he walked straight up to the wicket. He didn't go to where he was back. He came to me and he says, Babs, you are in your 90s, you must make the century. I am there. The rest is history. I did make the 100. Paralex myself met in Canada. You know, after 58, he got an island scholarship and he went to McGill University in Toronto, in Montreal, Canada. And I met him, I was at Ryerson University in Toronto. And all of a sudden, during the summer, I was working on the train, packing boxes. And the train station between Toronto and Montreal stopped. And then I heard someone say, Babs. When I looked, it was Farah. Farah was there as a conductor, train conductor. And he called me and he says, what are you doing here? And he pulled out his bag and he showed me and he said, this is tips, boy. He put his hand in the bag. He told me, open my hands. I gave open my hands and he said, that will be good for you. That was Farah Riviere. The next time I saw Farah Riviere was in Trinidad when there was the University Intercampus Games in Trinidad. And I went to Trinidad representing KVL, and he was there at St. Augustine as a lecturer. And we met and we spoke. And he told me that he was planning on doing law. He came down to Dominica when I was there, and he started an educational program for the young people of Dominica at the Political Gardens every Sunday at about 9 o'clock. Everybody gathered, and Para and Bernard Wilshire, the fellas, they would educating the young people at the Political Gardens every Sunday morning. And I was privileged, years after, to have moved his school when he became a lawyer, moved his school in Dominica. I think that Bernard Wilshire would also remember that I moved his school when he came down from London as a lawyer. In 1980, Para ran elections, as I did. I ran for the Dominica Freedom Party. Para ran for the Alliance, Alfie Martin and Bernard Wilshire. And we became and continued to be friends because he respected my political views just as I respected his. And when we won the elections in 1980, Freedom Party, he came and he congratulated me. And he says, I know you will do a good job. Para was a caring, very concerned with the politics of Dominica. Para understood, and not only Dominica, the world, Para understood what Pan-Africanism meant for the continent of Africa. Just as he understood what recolonization for the Caribbean meant. And that is why he followed the footsteps of people like Nkrumah, Marcus Garvey, Louis Carmichael, Patrice Lumumba, and among others. So he was always concerned with the development of our country. His family and my family were very close. And I remember that his brother, one of his brother, Mervyn, who also got an Island scholarship and went to Mona to do medicine. And also his brother, Osborne. And as life had it, because our family was so close, not forgetting his sister Doreen, Osborne and myself served in the cabinet of Dominica under the administration of Pierre Charles. So, I mean, lots can be said about Para and his family, my family, because, as I said, we were very close to each other. We continued until his death. Para, when my mother died in 2000, at the age of 92, Malvern's everybody knew. Para came and he says, I will prepare the eulogy for Malvern, which he did. And that eulogy was read by no other person than the late Prime Minister Ruthie Douglas, who lived with our family in River Street when he was going to school in Roseau. As I said, much more can be said. But if someone is to ask me, what do you think, or what you thought of Para? I would without hesitation say that Para was an educated, good person, a person who was not ungrateful in life. He tried to give back to his country of birth and by extension the Caribbean, all what he received from Dominica and other international organizations. I know he will be sorely missed. My wife, Zina, my daughter, Gina, my daughter, Heather, my daughter, Henrietta, and the rest of my family all sympathize with Para and his family. His wife and children. May his soul rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Okay, if you can mute your, right, good. I'll now call on the president of the Dominica Bar Association, Mrs. Heather Felix Evans.
Thank you, your ladyships. Good morning. I will adopt the protocol as already established by the court. On behalf of the executive and members of the Dominica Bar Association, I extend condolences to the widow, children, extended family, loved ones, friends, and employees of the late Dr. William Emmanuel Riviere, popularly known as Para Riviere or simply Para. Many of us in the legal profession did not have any or frequent interactions with Dr. Riviere and did not hear about him in real time during his most active years, as he spent a substantial part of his professional life out of Dominica and returned to live and practice law here at a very senior age. However, from the stories we have heard about Dr. Riviere, I think it would be true to say that he was a very bright and academically high-achieving individual. He was down to earth, concerned about the plight of the socially less fortunate, and committed to the cause of empowering the people of his community and all Black people. Dr. Riviere commenced his legal career at a relatively senior age after he had engaged in a very exciting and productive professional and social life. That is, after he had earned a doctorate in West Indian history, lectured history for several years at the University of the West Indies, Mona and St. Augustine campuses, and had spent many years being actively involved in the Black Power movement, both in Jamaica and Trinidad. Dr. Riviere was called to the Dominica Bar on the 3rd of January, 1997. Soon thereafter, he began his law practice as a sole practitioner, maintaining an office in Portsmouth and Roseau for several years until he closed his Roseau office a few years ago. From my interactions with him and observations of his interactions with others, Dr. Riviere always came across as knowledgeable, polite, gentle, humble, respectful, pleasant, and easy to talk to, though somewhat nobly reserved. He appeared to be a very good listener and always spoke with what seemed to be a great deal of thought to what he was saying. His physical stature, neat attire, and quiet and pleasant demeanor cast him as a very dignified figure and commanded the respect of others. Dr. Riviere was the ultimate gentleman. The executive members of the Dominica Bar Association were very saddened by the news of Dr. Riviere's illness, and most certainly shocked when almost immediately thereafter we heard of his death. The legal profession and Dominica have lost a man of substance, great achievement, distinction, and grace. Those of us who knew and interacted with him are grateful for having had that opportunity. We say to the family, loved ones, friends, and employees of Dr. Riviere, we understand that the depth of the loss and grief that you feel at this time is immeasurable. We pray for your comfort and strength and the transformation of your grief. We offer you these words from an unknown author. Grief never ends, but it changes. It's a passage, not a place to stay. Grief is not a sign of weakness, nor a lack of faith. It is the price of love. May the soul of Dr. William Emmanuel Parra Riviere rest in blessed peace, and may the grief of his loved ones soon be transformed into happy memories of times with Dr. Riviere. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Felix Evans. I will now call on the former president of the Bar Association, and she will be followed by the former registrar of the court, Mr. Reginald Winston. Ms. Roberts.
Thank you, my lady. My ladies, Madam Justice Bernie Stevenson and Madam Justice Wynand Adrian Roberts, Honorable Attorney General, Madam Registrar, protocol having already been established, good morning. I would like to greet in a special way the widow and family of our departed colleague, Dr. William Emmanuel Riviere, and offer my condolences. And I prefer my sincere condolences to the widow on behalf of not only myself, but on behalf of my colleagues in chambers with me, Mrs. Joan Prevost and Miss Chelsea Frampton. My ladies, from my earliest recollections growing up in Dominica as a child, I always knew of the Rivieres, a prominent Dominican family. Indeed, my ladies, my father, Mr. Basil Roberts of blessed memory, was very close to one Raglan Riviere, the brother of our departed colleague. And I grew up calling him Uncle Riviere. I was told that we were related, my father being an Anguillian and the mother of the Rivieres being an Anguillian. We were somehow connected. My mother, also deceased Eleanor, recalls the Rivieres and attended the Dominica Grammar School, one of the few ladies to do mathematics and to study with the Riviere brothers, in particular one Dr. Mervyn Riviere. Milady, I grew up in Dominica. Miladies, I grew up in Dominica during the 1970s. And it was an interesting time, somewhat of an age of enlightenment. The Black Power movement awakened in us a consciousness, and it instilled in us a pride of being Black and being patriotic and being Dominican. In the midst of all this, I was then a very precocious child. I would read everything and I would listen in on adult conversations. And it was then you heard of the name Para Revere. It was often heard, and to me it was synonymous with the movement. The history of Dr. Revere, Para Revere, and his contribution to that movement has been said before and is well recorded. In my imagination, I thought he would have been a militant person in those days when you thought of Black Power and you thought it was anti-establishment and communism and socialism. Milady, I got called to the bar before Dr. Revere. However, when he got called to the bar in 1997 and I personally met him, he was not the Para whom I imagined. He was a soft-spoken, sober gentleman. I introduced myself to him and I told him I was his cousin and I would call him cousin. Whenever I would interface with him, even when we were opposing counsel, I was impressed by his calm demeanor. He was well-reasoned, scholarly, and his considered deliberations and utterances spoke of his obvious intellect. He walked tall and proud, and I recall seeing him wearing his shirt jacks when not in court. And it reminded me of my father, whom himself wore a lot of shirt jacks, and told me that it was the approved formal wear for Dominica. Milady's counsel, Mr. John Eliud Charles, was extremely close to Para. Mr. Charles prefers to remain silent today, but has approved for me to make mention of the following on his behalf. Mr. Charles recalls being part of the movement with Para, fighting for independence and working on the construction of the Para Bridge in Portsmouth in the days when Kudma and community spirit was the way of life in Dominica. Mr. Charles, like our departed colleague, came late to the law. He had a life before the law. He studied natural sciences at Cave Hill. And when he transitioned into law, he recalls speaking with Dr. Revere Para, and he said that speaking with him, he was not disappointed since he gave him sage advice. He says he recalls that he always spoke properly to persons and that humility was a hallmark of his character. Therefore, on his behalf, I offer condolences to the widow and family of the deceased. Indeed, it was Mr. Charles who called me to inform me of the illness of Para and of an intended planned visit. Ladies, to me, the passing of Dr. William Emmanuel Para Bill Revere is symbolic as it marks the coming to an end of an era in Dominica. He made his contribution not only in his homeland Dominica, but regionally and international, as it has been chronicled here. He was a historian, a prolific writer, and I dare say that we never really appreciated him, perhaps because we felt incompetent or probably uncomfortable in his presence. Like my colleague, the former Attorney General, Mr. Wilshire, said, a prophet is never really recognized or honored in his country. And we have lost a Dominican, a true Dominican icon. With these few words, milady, I would like to extend my sincerest condolences again to the family, the widow, Jeannie, the family, his colleagues, his employees, and all those who mourn the loss of Para. I pray that God strengthens and comforts you all during this time. May his soul rest in eternal peace.
Thank you very much, Ms. Roberts. And now call on the former Registrar of the High Court, Mr. Reginald Winston. Mr. Winston. Unmute yourself. Right.
Thank you, milady. Miladies, Justice Stevenson and Justice Adrian Roberts, Honorable Attorney General, Madam Registrar, members of the bar. My earliest recollection of Para is going to the Botanic Gardens in the early 1970s to listen to him give those lectures there in the open park and enlighten us on his vision for Dominica. Para was indeed a visionary. He always saw what was better for Dominica coming from the colonial days, but also he also saw what was better for you as an individual. My family's connection goes back over 100 years with Paras. I remember my beloved mother of happy memory in her 99th year saying that she recalls going up the coast in a launch to visit and spend the summer holidays with the Revere family, where they were then stationed at Mao. His father was a headmaster, and my mother and her sister Muriel would go every year to spend the summer holidays with them. In fact, Muriel, my aunt, became godmother to Para's brother, Mervyn, eventually. But it was at law school that I came more closely connected with Para, because we were in the same year at Norman Manley. And I remember him being a mentor to me during those years. We always regarded each other as family. And he was a friend, a mentor, and he always guided me throughout those years of law school. It was at law school that I met his beautiful wife, Ginny, who lived in Jamaica at the time. And I remember going to their home to enjoy not only very sumptuous dinners, but to socialize with them, with Ginny and her family. I remember particularly it was Para who called me whilst I was on vacation in New York to let me know that we both were successful at the law school exams. I was fortunate to have met Para just a few weeks before his passing. And even then, we were able to exchange past recollections of the life we had lived, but he did so with so much humor and with so much candor. I will always remember his kindness, the way he shared everything. Nothing was too much for Para to share with you. But most of all, what a humble man he was, and a man of sublime spirit. Permit me to quote Longfellow, ladies. The lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing, leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. Ginny, his siblings, his children, the entire family, my heart goes out to all of you. May his dear soul rest in peace.
Thank you very much, Mr. Winston.
Much obliged.
I will now, I wish to, at this stage, convey the regrets of Miss Evelina Baptist. I received a message that she was unable to get onto the platform. I do not know if she's gotten onto it since. And a quick review of the platform shows that she hasn't. So we will move right along and we will call upon Mr. Glenn Ducre. Share a few words. Unmute yourself, please, sir.
Good morning, my lady. Madam Justice Wynette Adrian Roberts. While protocol has been established, allow me to recognize and acknowledge the presence of the registrars, the deputy registrar, attorneys at law, and the family of Dr. William Revere. My lady, it would be remiss of me if I had failed to deliver a few remarks at this special sitting. In memory of our fallen colleague, Dr. William Revere, widely known as Para, and in many cases, widely known and in many cases better known as Para. My lady, I knew Dr. Revere well and shared an unshakable bond of friendship that dates way back to the early 70s. Dr. Revere Para had his own nickname for me, and he alone called me Glenn Bo. Dr. Revere was brilliant, yet modest, unassuming, yet distinguishable, not boastful, yet confident. He was endowed with virtues of unmitigated honesty and unrivaled integrity. Dr. Revere cared little for the trimmings and trappings of wealth. And while he came from the middle class, and some may say from the privileged class, as most, if not all, the members of the Revere family were, as all were well educated and considered, along with others in the Portsmouth area, as the educated class of Portsmouth, he shunned privileges and the privileged class. And instead, he showed great affinity, love, and affection for the downtrodden, the oppressed, the left behind, and the common man. And he preferred to walk among and to work with that class of people. I met Para, Dr. Revere, in the 70s, and I was struck by his academic genius, his grasp of ideas, and his vision and passion for advocating and working for positive change in the lives of the common man. I recall in the early 70s, Para was the author and editor of the newspaper called Travail. And Travail was the organ of the movement for a new Dominica called the MND. MND was a civil rights movement at the time, and both Para and myself were members of that movement. I worked with Para as a contributed author, and MND's newspaper devoted substantial time and print space to promoting human rights. And we were particularly effective in giving a voice to the voiceless. And we denounced the dreaded and unconstitutional Dread Act of 1974 that criminalized youth for wearing dreadlocks that resulted in the incarceration of many young persons. Dr. Revere was also involved in establishing the Free Desmond Trotter Committee that sought the release of Desmond Trotter, who was charged and found guilty of murdering a white man. And the efforts by that committee were on the grounds that the key witness whose evidence led to his conviction recanted and reversed her story subsequent to the trial. One of our activities as the Free Desmond Trotter Committee was the attempted convening of a massive demonstration to which renowned scholar Walter Rodney of Guyana was invited to address the demonstration. The demonstration was banned, and so was Walter Rodney from entering the state. We nonetheless carried out, or rather attempted to carry out, our non-violent protest. And 13 members of the committee, including myself, Para Revere, William Revere, Ron Green, and Brother Egbert Germain, the principal of the SMA, the St. Mary's Academy, were arrested and charged. Whenever Para and myself met, we would reminisce about that event. And we would conclude with a good laugh about eating the tastiest and most delicious sandwiches while in the cells. The sumptuous sandwiches were supplied by the Catholic nuns to Brother Egbert Germain. And of course, we shared in such a feast. And by the way, my lady, we were represented by Dame Eugenia Charles and Justice Brian Allen. And I am hearing Mr. Dyer, Council Dyer, asking whether I have an antecedent sheet. Mr. Dyer, my slate is quite clean, as the charges, frivolous as they were, one of which was loitering, were all dropped. Farrar was also a fervent supporter of workers' rights and may well have been instrumental in the formation of the National Workers' Union. Additionally, Dr. Riviere, being an academic, was a very strong advocate of the promotion of education. And while a member of the Dominica Liberation Movement Alliance, he, along with Bernard Wilshire, Rosie Douglas, and Asti Mate, started the Cuban Scholarship Program, the administration of which was later assumed by the government. Dr. Riviere was always willing to share his knowledge, and I benefited greatly from it. He was my comrade, a mentor, and a personal friend in deed and in need. I cannot and will not forget his encouragement and support when I started my legal studies. I remain eternally grateful to him and remember vividly his providing me with law texts to assist me in the legal program. As a law colleague, I welcome his wisdom and intellect in matters of the law. And based on what I know, Dr. Riviere provided much pro bono work without any publicity, attention, and fanfare. The humility and character of a man. Farrar enriched the lives of many along his journey. He has made Dominica a better place, and his footprints will surely survive the test of time. To Jeannie and family and children, Ronald, Chico, Andrew, Alicia, Kim, and Gina, his siblings, comrades, friends, staff of William Riviere Chambers, and law colleagues, on behalf of my wife Irene, our children Coyote, Akil, and Candace, all of whom called him uncle, I extend deepest sympathy on our loss. May his good soul rest in eternal peace.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ducre. Before I give the closing remarks, is there anyone else who will wish to say something who's not on the list? Okay, I guess not.
My lady, Dawn Yearwood Stewart, I am unable to open my mic, but I will simply say that I did draw to attention to a few persons in Jamaica about his loss. As you know, he resided there for some time. And some persons had, in fact, through my own sister, who is a judge, indicated that I should indicate to his family and loved ones that they remember him and they remember him well. That is the extent of what I wish to say. Thank you, my lady.
Thank you. A quiet, dignified elder is how I will always remember Dr. William Emmanuel Farrar Bill Riviere. I have often said to persons around me that Dr. Riviere so reminded me of my father's older brother, Martin Stevenson of Council. My uncle was of the same stature and demeanor as Dr. Riviere. And like Dr. Riviere, he wore shirt jacks as his choice of formal dress. And I pause to say, even in Guyana, counsel was allowed to wear shirt jacks to court, and we did not wear bands. So the male lawyers, quite a lot of them wore shirt jacks. They were both men who honored their African heritage, the freedom movement, and they were both champions of the less fortunate in their country and region, who sought to enlighten and educate the youth of their country. In spite of being a practicing attorney, my uncle was always referred to as Teacher Martin. And from what I heard of Dr. Revere this morning, it has made me understand my instinctive liking of Dr. Revere. The last matter Dr. Revere did before me was a matter we loosely referred to as the Castle Bruce matter, where he represented in excess of 12 defendants in one matter. This matter took us to the village of Castle Bruce, where I sat in the magistrate's court. And oh, what a Roman holiday that was in the village, as many villagers came out to see the High Court judge and to see the High Court judge sitting in their village. Mr. Revere, as the years went by, appeared less and less before me. And in fact, after he closed his office in Roseau, I once told him not to come to town to court for his matter if it is not an involved matter, but to get one of the younger lawyers to come in and do it for him. If my memory serves me right, Mrs. Vidal Telemaque, Mrs. Yearwood Stewart, Mr. David Bruni, Mr. Glenn Ducre, along with our comrade, Mr. Michael Bruni, now of blessed memory, stepped up to the plate. And this was after Dr. Revere explained to me where it was he lived. And I realized that he, in fact, lived furthest away from the court than anybody else. And I really did not think that he should have been driving all the way into Roseau just to ask for an adjournment or just to enter consent order. So, you know, that was my feeling. I do believe in respect for our elders, honoring our elders. And so when he told me how he was traveling and where he was traveling for, I really did not think he should do it. I recall just about 8 years ago or so when my daughter was in fifth form at the convent high school, and she had to do her history SBA in her CSEC exams. And that year they were required to write on the history of land ownership and occupation in Dominica. Dr. Revere was the person I turned to. And he assisted us in sourcing literature for the project. And when I approached him, he was more than willing to oblige. I will always remember him for that. I wish to close very simply by quoting the words from Helen Stainer Rice. And I quote, she says, "Our dear ones pass on, and we see them no more. But we know they are waiting on some other shore. Death is a natural thing, like the closing of a door, as we start upon a journey to a new and distant shore. And none need make this journey undirected or alone, for God has promised us safe passage to this vast and great unknown." Unquote. I know that the separation from a loved one stings, but it has no permanence. I encourage you to place your hand in God's unchanging hand and to lay your head on his mighty shoulders as he understands our pain, your pain, and sorrow. He has also promised to change your mourning into dancing and your sorrow into joy. To the wife, the children, the family, the friends, the employees, and the colleagues of Dr. William Emmanuel Para Revere. I offer you my profound condolences. May Dr. Revere rest in peace and rise in glory. I will now invite us all to observe a minute of silence in respect of and memory of the fallen father, husband, relative, friend, colleague, employer, and comrade. Thank you, everyone. May the soul of our comrade rest in peace. Mr. Bailiff, it is the order of this court that the recording of this morning's session be put on either a disc, a CD-ROM, or a drum drive, and presented to the widow and family of Dr. Revere for their keeping. Can you please adjourn the court?
This honorable court stands adjourned, sine die. By command of this court, God save the Commonwealth of Dominica and this honorable court.